It is 8 p.m. here in East Africa and you're watching Africa Live. Hello and warmest welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm Penina Karibe. Coming up this hour. Mass protests have started in the Egyptian capital of Cairo, raising further fears of economic turmoil. And French raider wins the inaugural Tour de Congo cycling race in Kinshasa. We begin in South Africa, and it's been 10 years since an American president last visited South Africa. And Barack Obama may have a lot of work to do this weekend to rebuild relations. This from CCTV's Guy Henderson.
Next stop, South Africa, the continent's largest economy, its self-proclaimed spokesman to the rest of the world. Usually the lenses follow Barack Obama's every move. This time the focus remains on this hospital. The US president may not get his wish to see his idol Nelson Mandela, but South African government and ruling party officials say it's vital that this visit goes ahead.
We are also, in that context, welcoming Barack Obama today here in South Africa as the ANC. We welcome him. He stands welcome because America is a wonderful trading partner with South Africa. So he stands welcome, but he comes at a time when our icon is in hospital. And he has expressed that our icon must get better.
And while there is some
George W. Bush was the last American president to visit here. But disagreements over the Iraq War were already sending relations on a downward spiral. In the decades since, they haven't fully recovered.
South Africa was actually on the United Nations Security Council in 2007, 2008, and also in the last 2 years in 2011 and 2012. And then when they're on the Security Council, there was a lot of disagreements between the U.S. and South Africa, namely Burma, and also when it came to Zimbabwe and Syria and Libya.
And many see South African foreign policy as swinging east after joining the BRICS grouping of developing countries in 2010. But the country's foreign minister says the two aren't mutually exclusive.
We agree and disagree along the way, but our relations with BRICS is not at the expense of other relations, but all or for against. We see this new bloc and the forum as an advancement of world prosperity, peace, security and development.
The White House will want to use this trip to make up for lost time and may have a few cards up its sleeve.
For one thing, the United States is going to be offering up capacity building for peacekeeping operations as South Africa looks to extend its regional role. And American companies are also looking to get more involved in this country's infrastructure drive. So those two things specifically could thaw things moving forward diplomatically, or at least start to. Guy Henderson, CCTV, Pretoria.
Well, not everyone in South Africa is pleased with Barack Obama's visit. Even before he landed, protesters marched in the American embassy in Pretoria, and they are threatening more protests through the weekend. CCTV's Angelo Coppola has more.
By South African standards, a relatively small protest, maybe 300 or so people. The self-styled No-Obama coalition includes 15 different groups, among them the ruling ANC's alliance partners, the South African Communist Party and the Trade Union Federation COSATU.
We welcome the ushering of Obama as the first black president in the United States. We welcomed all those promises that he presented to the world, but we are very disappointed. This campaign, this march, this demonstration, it's informed by the disappointment that we have as South Africans, that we have as this coalition, that we have as COSATU, because we have the view that Obama, in particular with the African origin, that he knows the history of the continent, he will definitely be determined and also with eager and vigor for him to transform the current policies, foreign policies of the United States. And then he has failed dismally. He continued to present the same policies of Reagan and Bush, which are nothing but an attack to the world, an attack to the peace-loving people of South Africa.
And we're here simply to say that the warlords of America must stop exploiting the third world countries.
While the US Embassy was Friday's focal point, the coalition has other marches and protests planned.
And tomorrow he's speaking, Obama, at the Soweto campus of University of Johannesburg, will be there to give him a taste of 1976.
Security is going to be tight around Barack Obama throughout his visit to South Africa, but his critics here are determined that they will have their say.
The so-called No-Obama demonstration has come to a stop outside the US Embassy here in Pretoria, where they're going to be handing over a memorandum raising their concerns about Obama and his visit to the African continent. I'm Angelo Coppola for CCTV in Pretoria.
US President Barack Obama, together with his family, visited the historic Gorée Island before leaving Senegal. The island has a museum known as House of Slaves. A fort built in the late 18th century is a transit point for Africans before they were shipped across the Atlantic. Obama called the island visit a very powerful moment in appreciating the magnitude of the slave trade. Obama's father was from Kenya and his mother from Kansas, US. First Lady Michelle Obama is a descendant of slaves. Obama toured tiny cells that once housed men, women and children before they were taken in chains through the House of Slaves' infamous door of no return to waiting ships.
And I think more than anything what it reminds us of is that we have to remain vigilant when it comes to the defense of people's human rights because I'm a firm believer that humanity is fundamentally good, but it's only good when good people stand up for what's right. And this is a testament to when we're not vigilant in defense of what's right, what can happen.
You're watching Africa Live. Time for a break. When we come back. Sibling rivalry, Mandela's children in court over gravesite dispute as he remains critically ill. And rivals clash, supporters and opponents of Egypt's President Morsi stage protests in Cairo. Welcome back to Africa Live. And while Nelson Mandela is spending another night in hospital, some members of his immediate family have been squabbling in court. The feud was triggered by the exhumation of 3 of Mandela's children. CCTV's Renee Delcam has more.
16 members of Nelson Mandela's family, including his eldest daughter, Makaziwe, brought an urgent court application in the Mthatha High Court. The respondent, Mandela's powerful grandson. Mandla Mandela is said to have exhumed the remains of 3 of Nelson Mandela's children. They had been buried at the family gravesite in Qunu. But Mandla had moved them in 2011 to a site at nearby Mvezo without consulting the family or tribal elders. The court ruled against Mandla and that details of the order not be made public because of their sensitive nature. The chief of Mthatha says it's unacceptable for members of the Mandela family to be fighting one another in court at a time when their 94-year-old patriarch, Madiba, is fighting for his life in a hospital bed. He says it's embarrassing not only for the family but for the South African nation as a whole.
The family members of Mandela are fighting against each other about the removal of the bones, which were illegally removed by Mandla Chief Zwelithini Mandla Mandela without consulting the family. We think this could have been done or could have been arranged before Mandela got to hospital.
And like Friday's court proceedings, details around when and where the remains will be reburied remain shrouded in secrecy. Renee Delcam, CCTV, Mthatha.
Meanwhile, Nelson Mandela's former wife, Winnie Mandela, has been speaking to the press about the anti-apartheid icon's health condition after paying him a visit.
From what he was a few days ago, there is great improvement, but clinically he is still unwell. And we are available anytime you have very special questions which we can answer. But I'm not a doctor, and my family has just one doctor, my eldest daughter's son, that is the ambassador to Argentina. So we are thanking you on behalf of each and every member of our family. Thank you.
A close confidant of the Mandela family says the country must accept that Nelson Mandela's time is almost over. Politician Bantu Holomisa was among those present at a special family meeting in Mandela's home village earlier this week and says the family is still expecting that anything can happen. He spoke at length to CCTV's Renee Delcom.
Mr. Holomisa, you've been quite close with the Mandela family, especially during the past few days and weeks. How are they coping with this difficult situation?
Well, firstly, I think we must accept that President Mandela is an old person, and the family has been with him for quite some years, and they've been monitoring his health. You will notice, therefore, that almost every day they are with him. And I get the impression that they are expecting that anything could happen and they would be ready to accept that.
So having spent so much time with Madiba, you've seen his strengths, you've seen his weaknesses. What are some of them that really struck you?
I remember very well during the time I worked with him, during negotiations at CODESA period, he would call directly, he would call FW direct whenever he wanted to express some concern about the pace of negotiations. And he would get what he wanted. Behind that smile of Madiba, make no mistake, he was a tough cookie boy. He called Bush directly and other leaders of the Security Council. He doesn't believe in this following protocol. He wants to talk to the decision maker himself. His weakness, I would say in a brief way, is that he was too trusting, because if the comrades, he has delegated an issue to the comrades, he trusted them that they would do. But we know that later on he said, little did I know that even my comrades were corrupt.
How will you describe Nelson Mandela's leadership compared to the present leadership in South Africa?
We can't compare Mandela's leadership with the current leadership of the ANC and South African government. Madiba left a big void, and it will take centuries for anyone to fill that gap.
Let's now get more from CCTV's Famida Mila. She joins us live from Johannesburg. Famida, another day of anxious waiting for South Africans, but is there a sense now that perhaps the worst is over? And has the presidency's latest health update been reassuring at all?
Good evening, Panina. Well, looking at the environment here outside the Pretoria Hospital where Mr. Mandela is being treated, there's still a number of people gathering here, including church groups who've been singing songs of praise. They've been praying for the health of Mr. Mandela. And while in the last few days of this week, there was almost a resignation by many South Africans that the inevitable would soon come, there is a different spirit this evening that perhaps there could be a miracle, perhaps things that could change. And this is following the last official statement from the South African government that was given on Thursday afternoon. And in that statement, the government had said that Mr. Mandela's condition had improved, and while he is still critical, he is now stable. And there was improvement from the past few days. Now, if we look at events earlier on Friday afternoon, the Nelson Mandela's former wife, Winnie Madikizela Mandela, addressed media in Soweto. And she made it very clear at this address that she would not be discussing Mr. Mandela's condition. All she said is that he had in fact improved. There had been a great improvement, she called it, but at the same time she said he was still clinically unwell. Now, she used the address to speak to media, and this follows a statement by Mr. Mandela's eldest daughter where she had lashed out at media saying that they'd been insensitive, they'd been obtrusive, and they'd wanted things to change, and they were disrespectful of African culture. Well, earlier on Friday afternoon, Winnie Madikizela Mandela spoke to media saying that they do appreciate the media's role in informing the public. They appreciate who Mr. Mandela is, and the public needs to know. However, she said that she would want media to be mindful of the family's feelings at this point, how difficult the situation is for them, and she would want them to be sensitive and responsible and not cross any boundaries as far as possible. Now, once again, she said she wouldn't be discussing Mr. Mandela's condition any further, and instead just wanted to thank media for their role, but at the same time keep them in line with what the family's expectations are. Panina.
Quite a delicate balance there for media, but do we know yet if the Mandela family have approved or indeed requested a hospital visit from US President Barack Obama?
Well, Panina, US President Barack Obama is due to land in South Africa within the hour. He'll be based in Johannesburg at that point, while Mr. Mandela is in Pretoria. And previously there was talk about this visit, and also that Mr. Obama had said he would put this to the family and they would decide. Well, speaking to various analysts, and the information we've gathered in this week is that a visit is unlikely. It wouldn't be suitable, and that's also something that Winnie Madikizela Mandela also said in her address this afternoon, that she had no idea if Mr. Obama would visit Mr. Mandela, but that it wouldn't be suitable at this time. Now, speaking to the media himself, Mr. Obama aboard Air Force One had said that he's not looking for a photo opportunity, and he would of course wait for word from the Mandela family about any possible meeting. But as he said, he's not looking for a photo opportunity, and he said instead the message he would want to convey is not to Mr. Mandela specifically, but to the family, thanking them for the role that Mr. Mandela has played, and that message would be entirely about gratitude. So no official word yet about who Mr. Obama would be meeting with regard to Mr. Mandela. That meeting seems very unlikely, but if he could possibly be meeting with the family, we don't know yet. Panina.
All right, now Famida, thanks very much for that update. CCTV's Famida Miller live in Johannesburg. You're watching Africa Live. Let's take another break. Coming up. Rivals clash, supporters and opponents of Egypt's President Morsi stage protests in Cairo. And we explore the challenges of being a teacher in Togo.
International news with the global perspective. World Insight is the only program with analysis from around the world, with lively discussions and feature reports. Tuning each week for World Insight, only on CCTV News.
Welcome back. Thousands of Islamists gathered around a Cairo mosque on Friday to show support for President Mohamed Morsi before he marks 1 year in office. And his opponents hope millions will turn out on Sunday to demand new elections. There was a mostly festive atmosphere in the hot sunshine, with vendors selling mango and cakes and banners flying. The United States, which funds Egypt's army as it did under Mubarak, has urged compromise and respect for election results. Egypt's 84 million people control control of the Suez Canal and treaty with Israel all contribute to its global strategic importance. Opposition leaders dismissed Morsi's proposal on Wednesday to include the fragmented opposition in panels to review the constitution and promote reconciliation, saying such offers led nowhere because the Brotherhood refuses to dilute its power.
The majority of the Egyptian people support President Morsi, and when they voted for him, they voted for a 4-year program. So today, if they are talking about ousting President Morsi, this means they are ousting the democratic process as a whole. In 6 months' time, maybe another president will be elected, and they won't approve of him either. They'll oust him too, elect a third, and thus will go on in circles.
Mohamed Morsi will not fall because he has the people who love him and a group who support him. It is impossible, and the opposition are wrong to think that one day Morsi will have the same fate as Hosni Mubarak.
And to West Africa now, since the beginning of the year, thousands of public servants in Togo have been regularly demonstrating on the streets. They have been demanding better working conditions following 9 weeks of protracted negotiations with the government. Those negotiations are the latest challenge to President Faure Gnassingbé, who won a second term in 2010.
We are in a primary school in Lomé, Togolese capital. Here, 200 pupils and 7 teachers. But if the children seem enthusiastic to be at school, this is another story with their teachers. They are unhappy and worried about the future.
We practice our profession in distressing conditions and the pay is indecent. We fear for our children. It is very hard.
In this small West African country, teachers earn between 30 and 110 US dollars. After 23 years of career, for this primary school director, teaching is not an interesting job no more in Togo. Difficult to feed his family, especially when he has to spend monthly at least 80% of his salary for house expenses.
Even if wages are paid regularly for some, they are insignificant for all of us, and therefore they need to enhance the wages so that they really meet the needs of teachers.
After 7 hours of work, time to get home. The taxi from the school to his place cost $2 US, too much for Manglo. At home, he finds there his wife and 2 of his 5 children. And as usual, they speak about a way to manage their budget.
Rent in Lomé was between 4 and 10 US dollars before the political crisis, but this has increased to between 12 and 20 US dollars for a small room of up to 6,000 square feet. Despite all this, wages have remained the same for so many years.
This is really painful. The situation became unbearable for him, but also for me and the children, but we keep strong together, most of whom are forced to borrow to survive. This is really not easy.
According to the World Bank, 72% of the Togolese population lives with less than $1 a day. Public servants, but also students, expressed their anger since January. The Togolese government had promised to meet their expectations. Nico Dantegos, Lomé, CCTV.
Sanctions should be placed on Madagascar's leaders, including 3 controversial candidates accused of stalling presidential elections. This is according to international community representatives who met to discuss the island's political crisis. The International Contact Group also called for a new date for the elections. Garoyola has the details.
The International Contact Group met at the African Union headquarters in the Ethiopian capital Addis Ababa. They expressed their discontent over the island's National Election Commission's decision to allow some candidates who are widely considered controversial to contest for the presidency. The AU's Peace and Security Commissioner said 3 candidates are the cause of the current impasse. They include current President Andry Rajoelina, former President Marc Ravalomanana's wife Lalao, who declared herself a candidate, and veteran leader Didier Ratsiraka, who was toppled by Ravalomanana.
It supports the positions taken by the AU and SADC. It clearly states that there is a need for the 3 candidates to withdraw. It adds that other people whose candidatures also are not consistent with Malagasy law should withdraw.
Lamamra said the group called on the international community to apply robust, targeted sanctions against all those undermining the smooth running of the electoral process. The sanctions include a travel ban and freezing of assets for the leaders, their relatives, their collaborators, and their close business partners.
The Special Electoral Court should be restructured and its composition also reconsidered in order to ensure not only that, in order to ensure that the whole process, from the consideration of the candidatures to the final outcome.
The group said 2 other candidates who have also not complied with electoral laws should also pull out. Elections were initially slated for early May but have been repeatedly delayed.
They decided by free will to remain impartial. And so even when some people are suggesting for them to take some measures, they have been very cautious and have refused to go beyond and give chance to the process to continue.
SADC mediator Joachim Chisano and his delegation will leave for Madagascar on July 9th to submit the International Contact Group's recommendations. Carol Oyola, CCTV.